Smiling faces sometimes pretend to be your friend.
Hi, my name is Joseph Morocha. I was the electrical supervisor in the maintenance department at Palos Community Hospital. Ken Lash, the manager of clinical engineering, was my direct supervisor. I was a salaried employee. One of the perks of being a salaried employee is that if you need to leave work early for a legitimate reason, you get paid for the 8-hour workday. So if you have a family emergency or get sick or go home early, you get paid for the entire day. This is a perk to compensate for all the times you work 10, 12, heck, it could be 16 hours or more, and for the times you get called out in the middle of the night. In the attendance policy, if an employee calls in sick, it is considered an incident. If an employee calls in sick 3 times in 6 months, he is subject to disciplinary action for violations of the attendance policy. However, if an employee comes to work, gets sick, and goes home early, it is not counted as an incident in the attendance policy. The employee came to work, he didn't call off, all is good. So anyway, here's my story. I come to work, and in the course of the workday, I get sick. I call Ken Lash, my boss, and I tell him I was sick and I have to go home. The very next workday, Ken Lash calls me in his office and tells me he's changing my time for the day I came to work and went home sick. He changed my time to 8 hours sick and erased the hours I worked that day. I told Ken Lash, I'm salaried. If I go home early sick, I get paid for the entire day. Ken Lash says, I'm not paying you for a day you went home sick. I asked Ken Lash, what about the hours I did work? Ken Lash said he changed my time to 8 hours sick, and that was the end of that. I asked Ken Lash to check with Human Resources if a salaried employee gets sick and goes home before the end of the workday, does he get paid for the day? My salary was based on a little over $42 an hour. By taking 8 hours sick out of my sick pay accrual, it was like Ken Lash reaching in my pocket and cheating me out of $336. Once you accrue enough sick hours, any further time accrued is paid by check at the end of the year. Ken Lash actually falsified the time he submitted to payroll, saying I did not come to work on a day that I did. Wrongfully took 8 hours of sick pay out of my sick bank, cost me to lose at least $336, and created an attendance incident on my record, which now shows me as taking the entire day off sick. It gets worse. I had to go in for surgery, so I took a week off on sick pay. Afterwards, I needed to go in for doctor visits for follow-up for my surgery. I tell Ken Lash I was going to go for follow-up care for my surgery during my lunch period. Ken Lash tells me I had to take the entire day off as sick. I told Ken Lash, as a salaried employee, this is allowed. I asked Ken Lash to check with Human Resources. I was giving Ken Lash another opportunity to check with Human Resources to find out what the policy is for salaried employees. Ken Lash said I had to take the entire day off as a sick day. It cost me another sick day, which is $336, and created an attendance incident on my record, which now shows me as taking the day off sick, which Ken Lash wrongfully forced me to do. It just keeps getting worse and worse. After I took the day off sick for follow-up care, Ken Lash gave me a verbal warning, the first step in the progressive disciplinary action process, for violation of the attendance policy for incidents of calling in sick. This is nuts. The first incident was created by Ken Lash falsifying my time, showing I called in sick when I actually came to work. The other incident was a result of Ken Lash denying me as a salaried employee to go to the doctor during or before the end of the workday, which I am entitled to do by policy. Ken Lash falsifies my time, denies me what I'm entitled, and I'm the one that gets disciplined? I don't know how many follow-up visits I'm going to need for my surgery. I filed for Family Medical Leave Act protection and Human Resources, asking to be able to use sick time for the follow-up doctor visits. I get a letter from Ken Lash saying I am an exempt employee, and his letter included that I can leave work, go to the doctor, and return to work. Now, I don't know if Ken Lash finally checked with Human Resources, or if Human Resources asked Ken Lash why a salaried person would need FMLA protection for doctor visits. Ken Lash's letter allowing me as a salaried person to leave work, go to the doctor, and return to work was an extremely large text. If the text was any larger, it wouldn't have fit on the page. And just as in text messaging, very large text is considered the same as screaming at someone. I got the message, Ken. Now that I had FMLA protection for my surgery and doctor visits, the verbal discipline Ken Lash gave me is moot. I took an additional 4 FMLA sick days off to complete the necessary follow-up care for my surgery. Now, the way I see it, Ken Lash cost me a total of 6 sick days, which I took off unnecessarily because Ken Lash either didn't know what the policy was or he denied me intentionally. Either way, I see it as Ken Lash cost me at least $2,016 right out of my pocket. It was Ken Lash's responsibility and duty as the manager and my boss to know what the policy was. And to be fair, if Ken Lash didn't know what the policy was, why didn't he check with Human Resources as I asked him to do on 2 separate occasions? If Ken Lash intentionally violated policy, his actions were malicious and outrageous, unfairly costing me over $2,000. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. I met with Ken Lash after he sent me the screaming letter saying I can leave work, go to the doctor, and return to work. I asked Ken Lash if he would at least correct my time for the day he changed my time to 8 hours sick and erase the hours I did work. Ken Lash told me it was too late to do anything. Now I'm thinking to myself, all you have to do is pick up the phone, call payroll, tell them there was a mistake, and mark that day as work, and add 8 hours pay back to my sick bank. I never did get any of that money back. Ken Lash did nothing to make it right. So I'm in the meeting with Ken Lash. He tells me he's not going to do anything about the money he cost me. But he tells me he was talking to Mary Denichenko in Human Resources, and she told him he can discipline me for asking for John Ulrich to be promoted to top of grade electrician. John Ulrich is one of the electricians working under my supervision in the electric shop. Ken Lash told me he was giving me a verbal warning that if I ask for John Ulrich to be promoted again, I will be disciplined. A verbal warning, the first step in the progressive disciplinary action process. I did on several occasions over the years ask for John Ulrich to be promoted. I valued John as a knowledgeable, hardworking employee. And as the electrical supervisor, that's part of my job. In my description, it specifically states, evaluates personnel, recommend salary increases, promotions, demotions, and disciplinary action. Working for Ken Lash just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. I can only view Ken Lash disciplining me for asking for John Ulrich to be promoted not only ridiculous, but also as being retaliatory. It seems to me Ken Lash was so pissed off over being shown wrong by falsifying my time when he changed my time from worked to a sick day for a day I actually came to work, and was shown to Human Resources not to be following policy when he denied me the perk as a salaried employee to leave work and to go to the doctor as I was entitled. So you, the viewer, decide. Does Ken Lash's actions show him as a credible person? As an employee, what about my $2,000? I'm hoping that Sister Wright, Mary Denon Shakel, Marty Barron, or even the Palos Community Hospital attorney sees this video and at least one of them says, hey, Joe was cheated out of $2,000. Let's do the right thing and pay him the $2,000. He lost it because it was Palos Community Hospital's error.